Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't know very much about the Godzilla franchise as a whole. I'm into a lot of things that people might consider to be autistic. Frank Herbert's Dune, Star Wars, anime, Paradox Grand Strategy games, even stuff like fan fiction. But Godzilla's always been a spurg too far. If you were to have the iceberg of autism, it would be a level or two below what even I might think. In order to become a hardcore fan of the Godzilla franchise, you must spend thousands of hours of selective movie watching, a biological and psychological manipulation so that you are able to look into the place that normies cannot. And once you look in there, you will see Godzilla in a rubber suit staring back at you. To put it in Dune terms, but I digress. So, for me personally, I saw the Godzilla movie back in 1998. I didn't see it right when it came out. I was at a friend's birthday party and we watched it, and I had a lot of fun. And I thought, this movie is bad, but it's a lot of fun. It's stupid. It has a lot of so bad it's good potential to it. Plus, I was like 10 years old at the time, and I didn't really have any sense of taste. But I like that movie. It's something I can sit down and watch and just laugh at. Beyond that, there was a Godzilla animated show, which I think was okay. I don't really remember anything about it. But then we come to the MonsterVerse films. And I'm going to be honest, I'm sorry if there's MonsterVerse fans out there, but I didn't think a franchise could get more boring, mediocre, and dull than the Marvelverse, but I honestly think the MonsterVerse might actually be worse. The only movie I kind of liked in it was Kong Skull Island, but the rest I really haven't liked. We can talk about Shin Godzilla more some other time, but overall I thought it was pretty good. It wasn't amazing, it wasn't exactly my thing, but I thought it was a solid movie. It was enough that I said to myself, you know what, if another Godzilla movie comes out and it's more mainstreamy than what they used to make, then you know what, I'll give it a try and I'll watch it. So last year we had the release of Godzilla Minus One, which actually got a theatrical release in North America. Now, I was going to go see it, but it was only in theaters in Canada for like a week or so, and I wasn't able to make it in time. And then it took a while for it to get onto streaming platforms, but I was looking at Netflix the other day, and lo and behold, Godzilla Minus One was on it. So I figured, let's watch Godzilla Minus One. Let's see if it lives up to the hype. Let's see if I can stare into the place that normies cannot stare into. So I guess in summary, what did I think of Godzilla Minus One? I'm going to say I think it was a very solid character drama and period piece that just happened to have Godzilla in it. I'm not sure if I'm alone in it, but I tended to find the scenes where you have Koichi and Noriko just kind of talking, having their lives together, scenes where the boat crew is bonding and stuff like that. I tended to like that a lot more than the Godzilla scenes, and I personally found those the most uninteresting in the movie. Once again, that might just be me, but I thought that the main strength of this film was as a character piece and as a period piece, rather than any kind of monster movie. And as much as Godzilla exists in the film, Godzilla kind of represents the guilt Koichi feels over the events of the war and Japan's attempt to deal with national trauma. Once again, I don't know if this is the norm for Godzilla movies or not, but that was at least the impression that I got from it. I do kind of almost wonder if this was a script that was intended for a standalone movie that had nothing to do with Godzilla, and they just decided, well, this isn't going to sell and no one's going to want to see this if it's just a period piece, so we're just going to put Godzilla in it and release it and see how that goes. Regardless, I thought it was a very solid movie, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. Now, that being said, let's get into the plot, the story, and what I liked about it. So, this is a period piece that takes place at the end and immediate aftermath of World War II in Japan. Now, I'm sure there's lots of Japanese period films that cover this era, but as a Westerner, I can't really think of too many that cover the immediate aftermath of World War II, particularly what things looked like on the ground. America had just firebombed most of Japan. It had nuked other parts of it. And it is really cool to kind of see this time period in history, which, like I said, as a Westerner, is just something I don't get exposed to that much. Now, the film begins near the end of World War II, where we have kamikaze pilot Koichi, who lands his Mitsubishi Zero at a airstrip on a remote island. Now, the chief mechanic quickly figures out that there isn't actually anything mechanically wrong with the plane. Koichi just doesn't want to be a kamikaze pilot, especially since it's obvious that the war is going to be over within days at this point in time, and there's no real purpose to him sacrificing himself. And having read a biography of Emperor Showa, I know by the end of the war that was very much how most of the Japanese public was feeling. There was just a sense of complete national. Now, keep in mind, Japan had been in World War II, or what would become World War II, a lot longer than most countries. For Japan, you could argue World War II started when they occupied Manchuria, although the main war in earnest against nationalist China started with the Marco Polo Bridge incident in 1937, and they had been fighting China, which was one of the main Allied powers, on and off since then. Sometimes it was more intense, sometimes it was less intense. Now, Japan was a recently industrialized country and was definitely very powerful by East Asian standards, but it was still a recently industrialized country. It hadn't quite achieved the heights that the United States and Britain and Germany had. And yet it was kind of trying to do too much with too little. It was trying to squeeze, I guess you could say, too much liquid through too small a straw. So while it was able to do a lot of stuff, it took immense pressure on the economy, on the population, forced conscription, exceedingly brutal repression, the military just taking resources, just stealing. The government was a stratocracy at that point in time, with the Air Force and the Navy and the Army fighting over resources. It was a very miserable time. And as the war went on, it got more and more miserable, and the people had to endure more and more deprivations, even as it was pretty clear, especially by 1945, that the war was lost, and any further resistance would just get more people killed. So the mechanic, even after he figures out that that Koichi is faking it, just says, "Look, dude, I get it. Like, why are you going to go ram your plane into a U.S. ship when this war is going to be over in, like, a week?" However, Koichi doesn't get off quite that easily, because that night, while they're at the garrison and they're eating together, a giant dinosaur-like creature, obviously Godzilla, attacks the camp. And they try running away into a trench, but Godzilla chases them. They fire at Godzilla, but bullets don't do anything. Now, Koichi Zero is sitting out on the airstrip, and it has its 23, I believe, millimeter cannons. Now, I thought a Zero had 20 millimeter cannons, but I'm pretty sure they say 23 in the movie, so I don't know if it's a special model or what it is. But they decide that, well, if the machine gun isn't working, the cannons might be able to kill it. So the head mechanic, Tachibana, sends him to get in the aircraft. Godzilla walks in front of the Zero. He's too scared to fire, though, and the rest of the team gets killed, with the exception of Tachibana. The war ends shortly after, and they get evacuated back to the mainland. While they're on the transport ship returning, Tachibana goes to Koichi and gives him pictures of all the soldiers' families, and basically tells him, "This is your fault. They all died because of you. You're a coward. You failed to die for your country as a kamikaze pilot, and you also failed to die for your country. Or not even your country, but die to save your fellow men, your fellow soldiers. You're just worthless, and you have to bear this guilt for the rest of your life." He returns to his home, where he finds out that his parents have been killed. And we get some really cool scenes of post-war Tokyo. And everyone's just basically living in, not necessarily refugee camps, but they're living in, like, the in tents on the spots where their houses used to be. And Koichi's house is just completely destroyed, and you have people trying to hand out aid, and it's just complete and total chaos. And there's a couple good scenes where his next door neighbor just starts yelling at him and calls him a coward and says the fact that he came back um, means it's his fault that the Americans won the war. If he had done his duty, then her children wouldn't have died in the bombing attacks. And she just kind of lays the whole guilt thing on thick. It's very clear that throughout the movie that Koichi is suffering from pretty severe PTSD and depression as he tries to struggle with the guilt he feels over the war. Now he runs into Noriko, who is a woman who has a orphan baby, Akiko. And if I recall, she's having to steal to survive and to try to feed the baby. And he takes pity on her and he winds up taking her in, and one thing leads to another and she winds up living with him. Now, the baby is not actually Noriko's child. It was a baby who she said a dying mother gave the baby to her and asked her to take care of it for her. And she decided to honor the woman's final request. And I'm not ultra understanding, or rather ultra knowledgeable about Japanese culture, but given how people react and what I do know, it seems like the idea of trying to adopt somebody else's baby who's not related to you by blood seems like a very weird and almost taboo thing in the context of the movie. People just found it really strange that someone would take in the child of somebody else who's not a direct blood relation. I'm not sure if that's like a Christian thing, like in the West it's just more common for people to adopt orphans, or what it is, but that was kind of an interesting aspect to it. Meanwhile, the United States continues nuclear testing on the Bikini Atoll. It winds up hitting Godzilla, and it mutates him from being a big dinosaur to being the colossal monster that we all know and love. Realizing that he now has a woman to take care of and a child, Koichi tries to find work. And he finds work working on a minesweeper whose job is to go along the coast of Japan and disable naval mines. That's one of the big things that people sometimes forget about when wars end, is you have all the unexploded munition and all the mines. And there were tens, if not hundreds of thousands, I don't know the exact number of mines that were placed around Japan, both by the Japanese and the Americans, that need to be disposed of because they're just there, and at any point in time they could just hit a random ship going by and kill a whole bunch of people. It's just not acceptable to leave them there. Landmines are bad enough, but one mine might only kill a couple people, whereas a sea mine could potentially kill hundreds of people, depending on how big the boat it hits us. Now, kind of a funny thing is, Koichi signs up in part because he's told that the boat is specifically made to take down mines. And he finds it's like this really crappy wooden fishing boat. But as the captain points out, most of the mines they're getting rid of are magnetic, and obviously it's a wood boat, so the magnetic mines don't stick to it. So we're treated to a whole bunch of cool scenes of Koichi bonding with the people on the fishing vessel as they go and get rid of mines. Koichi makes a place on the team as he has really good aim with the machine gun. It's kind of cool to watch them. They basically cut the chain or whatever holding the mine down, and then they shoot it with a machine gun to blow it up. And we see kind of Koichi going through his character arc, because it's very clear that he's in love with Noriko and she's in love with him, and he's found work for at least a time with a bunch of guys who he's able to bond with, who he's able to open up to a little, and he's no longer kind of alone as he was at the start of the movie. And it's kind of cool to see them rebuild the house. Over time, they just build it up again little by little. The girl grows up little by little. It seems like his neighbor has kind of forgiven him because she agrees to watch Akiko while they're out at work. Noriko also gets a job. So it looks like things are starting to look up, and people ask him, why don't you just marry Noriko? She's a cutie. She obviously loves you. You're basically acting as a family. And he's like, the reason I can't marry her is I don't deserve to be happy. I don't deserve to have a loving wife. I don't deserve to have this this home and this stuff, because so many people didn't come back for the war. And it is very much, I think you can see kind of a parallel as they gradually are rebuilding Tokyo. You can see Koichi's kind of persona gradually being rebuilt, him slowly but surely starting to get past the guilt. However, he still feels that he's in need of redemption, that his redemption arc hasn't finished yet. Meanwhile, Godzilla has started sinking ships. Now, the Americans, because this is a Japanese movie, don't really want to help him out, so Douglas MacArthur gives the Japanese government a couple decommissioned cruisers, and he's like, okay, you guys can go deal with it yourselves, you're not going to get any help from us. So they send a heavy cruiser out to fight Godzilla. Godzilla fires his heat ray at it and blows the cruiser up. That was the largest threat they really had to it. They attempt to take out Godzilla themselves by dropping a mine into his mouth. That doesn't work either, although that does actually seem to help him. It seems that Godzilla is basically a Dodongo in this movie, and to kill him you have to put a significantly powerful explosion into his mouth. Godzilla eventually makes it to the mainland and just starts destroying stuff. The Japanese army, or what's left of it, begins firing at Godzilla. That pisses him off, and he just starts blowing the whole city up with his heat ray. And it appears that Noriko died. She pushes Koichi to safety instead of getting out of the way herself. And it seems to everybody that she's dead. And this is yet another disaster. This is yet another guilt on Koichi, and he just gets increasingly depressed. But he decides that he now has a purpose in life. He's going to kill Godzilla. So the Minesweeper crew and a bunch of other guys who are frustrated with the incompetence of the Japanese government, who just basically covers up Godzilla and pretends that nothing's going on, have a crack plan. So the plan is that they're going to sink Godzilla to the bottom of the ocean with Freon tanks. And hopefully once Godzilla reaches the bottom, raw water pressure will crush him. If that doesn't work, they have balloons as part of it. The balloons will activate, Godzilla will be brought back to the surface, and he will basically explode from explosive decompression. Should all of this fail, they have a backup plan. They find a Kyushu Shinden fighter, which I believe is a Japanese jet fighter, or some kind of advanced prototype that might have been a jet fighter. Anyways, they bring this advanced fighter craft, and they decide that because the mines seem to do damage, Koichi is going to redo what he did previously as a kamikaze pilot. They're going to load this plane full of explosives, and he's going to fly it right into Godzilla's mouth and blow him up that way if all the other plans fail. And Koichi agrees to do this. This is his redemption arc. He's going to be able to die for his country. He's going to die to save his comrades. And he's going to make amends for all the failures that he believes that he had. Now, as part of this, they need a crack team to repair the jet. And the only person he knows who's able to finish up the jet is Tachibana, the former mechanic. So he sends Tachibana a letter basically goading him, saying that all the people who died were losers, that he's happy they're dead. And Tachibana comes back and beats the shit out of him. And he winds up telling him the truth, and then he agrees to help out. And so we got the plan together. The plan comes together. They're going to take down Godzilla. Godzilla gets badly damaged, but he starts regenerating, and he charges up his heat rakes. He's going to blow up all the tugboats and destroyers that are carrying out this plan against him. And then Koichi comes out and flies the jet into Godzilla's mouth. From my understanding, what it does is the ray hits the aircraft, and it creates like a chain reaction. It's kind of like in Independence Day, where they fire the death beam, and then the death beam hits something, and then it immediately explodes. It explodes too close to the target. It's kind of the same principle as if you have a rocket-propelled grenade launcher, and you fire it directly in front of a wall. It is going to explode before it goes through it. It hits anything else, and you're going to be hit in the resulting explosion. So it looks like so that kills Godzilla, or at least it looks like it kills Godzilla. And it looks like Koichi has died. Death equals redemption. However, as it turns out, there was an ejector seat. Tachibana learned to get past his anger and hatred and resentment of Koichi, and he had put one in. So Koichi was able to survive. And as he comes back, it turns out that his waifu is actually still alive, just very badly injured. So he goes to visit Noriko at the hospital. However, it's kind of like one of those horror movie endings where it's like, or at the end, or is it because this weird black bruise is creeping up her neck? So we don't know if she's going to die, if this is like their last meeting, or if they're going to go on and live happily ever after. But Koichi appears to have completed his character arc. He's redeemed himself in his own eyes from all his failures during the war. He's managed to save the day. He's completed the kamikaze run that he never made. And I think part of the implication is he's able to move on. He's able to marry his waifu now. They can raise their adopted daughter together, maybe have a couple more kids. And I think it's supposed to echo Japan recovering from the national trauma that was World War II, and just how much devastated it was, not just from the Americans, but from what the military did to Japan in terms of taking resources, forced conscription. The military police were exceedingly brutal. So on the whole, I thought it was a really good film. Godzilla, like I said, I don't think was even really that important to it. It's very much a character study of a veteran who has survivor's guilt and PTSD, trying to become a whole person again, trying to find redemption, and ultimately finding it. Also, just stuff about people tending to self-sabotage themselves if they don't think that they're worthy, learning to live and forgive and let go, and just kind of a cool view, like I said, of a time in history that you don't really see too often in Western movies. So, on the whole, I would say that this film was really good. It's something I'd recommend. I never thought I'd be recommending a Godzilla film, but I definitely give it a watch. Even if you're not a fan of Godzilla films, I think it works as like a romantic drama and as a period piece just as well, if not better, than as a monster movie. So that's the review of Godzilla -1. I hope you found it interesting. God bless, and more content to come.